Everything's set up, ready to go?
Just ask Mr. Deal if he sees it on Facebook.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good
Good to go?
afternoon.
Hey, it's recording on Facebook. I'm sorry, Mr. Deal. Is it?
Yes, we're good to go.
All right. Sorry, Mr. Seaver.
Good afternoon. Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Michael Dowry, and I serve as receiver for the city of Chester. Today is Tuesday, August 27, 2024, and we are joined here today to have a Municipal Financial Recovery Advisory Committee meeting, MFRAC. As always, we are joined on behalf of the Governor's Office and Department of Community and Economic Development by Executive Director Andrew Sheaf, on behalf of the City of Chester, Mayor Roots, and also Councilman Davis, and on behalf of Delaware County Council, Ms. Kelly Diaz. Good afternoon, all.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And take a second to Good afternoon, sir. Take a second to introduce our Chief of Staff for this engagement, Mr. Vijay Kapoor, and Executive Assistant from DCD, Mr. Cody Dale. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So we have a lengthy presentation today, so we're going to jump right into that. Everyone should have received a summary of our last meeting along with an agenda for today. As usual, we'll open up with public comment. Mr. Dale, have we received any public comments since our last meeting?
No public comments were received before the agenda was circulated last Thursday. So we'd just like to again encourage the public to reach out to us, and any public comments for the committee can be sent to our resource account, info@chesterreceivership.com.
Mr. Dale, we will report back on, I'm sure there's a ton of public comment coming in now, and we'll address that at the next meeting. Are there any questions or concerns from the committee before we get into the presentation? Well, hearing none, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Kapoor for today's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Receiver. Thank you, members of the MFRAC committee and the public who are watching. As we indicated at the last MFRAC meeting, where we went over some operational updates, we were going to use this meeting to do a bankruptcy update. We are going to obviously do that, but what we are going to be doing is covering and going into the plan of adjustment that was filed on behalf of the city by the receiver yesterday in U.S. bankruptcy. So I've got a presentation. Let me go ahead and share my screen here, and we will get into it just in a moment. Can everybody see it? Okay. Great. So let's get into today's presentation. As I indicated, and as probably most of you know, yesterday the receiver filed what's referred to as a plan of adjustment in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court. That plan of adjustment proposes a process by which the city could generate annual revenue for city services through a monetization process, and that would monetize Chester's water, sewer, and stormwater assets, with the important caveat that they remained publicly owned, that they remained in public hands. As most of you know, this plan has come after a very long time of state oversight, over 30 years of the city of Chester, including over 4 years of receivership and nearly 2 years of bankruptcy. And we all believe that this is a critical first step in terms of moving forward. So what we're going to talk about today is what's in the plan, what's not in the plan, why the receiver filed the plan, and the expected next steps. For those of you who are interested in actually reading what was filed, you can find that at the link that we have here on the Donlin Rocano website. It is also on the receiver's website, chesterreceivership.com. There's a video that the receiver and the mayor are in, and below that there is a link to download the plan of adjustment. So without going too far into the timeline, I just did want to provide a timeline just so those of you who may be tuning in more recently can get a sense of really what's been going on here since we've been in receivership and bankruptcy. And receivership started back in June of 2020, and there's a lot that has happened in between. The receiver filed a plan modification in Commonwealth Court back in November of 2022, bankruptcy a couple days later. A lot's been going on within the bankruptcy case, and we are and continue to be in mediation with all the creditors. This plan of adjustment does not change that. We will continue to be in mediation with all of the creditors, with all of the parties. But as we've indicated, we need to move things forward. The filing of this plan on August 26th of 2024, again, comes 4 years, over 4 years since receivership began. Again, we continue to need to move to move the process forward. So let me talk a little bit about what a plan of adjustment actually is. Um, it is a document at its core. It is a document that provides for the treatment of creditor claims against the debtor. That's some fancy bankruptcy language. Here, the city of Chester is the debtor. Groups such as retirees, city unions, bondholders, and others are creditors. So it's a document that provides for the treatment of those claims against the city. It's similar to an Act 47 recovery plan that we've gone over several times, but bankruptcy provides the city with additional rights and powers. And the bankruptcy court, excuse me, the plan of adjustment is filed with the bankruptcy court, and it must be confirmed by the bankruptcy court before becoming effective. Now, I want to make clear one point over here, and I'll emphasize it as we go a little further. The RFP process that is set forth in the plan of adjustment, the proposed RFP process, does not require the bankruptcy judge to have to approve that. That is something that the city can do on its own. So I want to make very clear about that in case there's any questions about whether there needs to be bankruptcy court approval before an RFP process moves forward. It does not. And then finally, once confirmed by the bankruptcy court, the plan of adjustment automatically amends the Act 47 recovery plan. That is in this Act 47 statute and is clear. So any approved plan of adjustment by the bankruptcy court will automatically amend the Act 47 recovery plan. It does not need to go back to Commonwealth Court for approval. So continuing on with what a plan of adjustment is, a plan of adjustment as filed, it can be amended or supplemented. And as I indicated earlier, the receiver will continue mediation in the hopes of reaching agreements with all parties. As we'll discuss later, this particular plan focuses on a process to monetize Chester's assets in its water, sewer, and stormwater assets, which is a process that has to be started now. It does not address, so this plan does not address issues related to retirees or the city's unions. The receiver will continue to mediate those issues, and they'll be addressed in supplements to the plan that will be filed at a later date. As those of you who have been following this know, the receiver has been consistent in his message that Chester must monetize its water, stormwater, and sewer assets. And the reason for that, and we'll get into that in a few slides right now, because I think it is important for the public to know kind of why this is happening. It's being done in order to avoid severe cuts to retiree benefits and to city services. So again, to take a moment here and to go through a couple of slides before we get into what's in the plan of adjustment, we really want to focus on the question of why does Chester need to monetize its assets? Why are we going through this process? Why was this plan filed? And the reason is, ultimately the receiver doesn't have another choice. Financially, Chester's tax base cannot support basic city operations. Chester's pension and retiree healthcare costs are unsustainable. And without monetization, Chester would need to make extreme cuts to retiree benefit levels and city services. The city's water, sewer, and stormwater assets are very valuable, and they are the only substantial assets the city can monetize. But again, let's make it clear here, monetization does not mean privatization. And even with monetization, Chester still has to reduce its retiree benefit expenses, and it needs to make other financial and operational changes. So monetization of these assets, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient for Chester to be financially and operationally successful. So we have to do it, but it's not enough by itself in order for Chester to be financially and operationally successful. So let's go into just, again, we'll spend a few moments on here and a few slides, which again, I think are important to help understand the magnitude of the financial problem that Chester's facing. Because again, the retiree group is the city's largest creditor in this bankruptcy. In Detroit, I believe it was the bondholders. But in this case, in the city of Chester, the largest creditor are retirees. And thus, the reason to have a monetization, again, is to avoid severe cuts to pensions and retiree health care. And as an update, although we've made some progress with improving the status of the police pension plan and with moving many retirees to a less costly healthcare plan arrangement, the city still faces unsustainable pension and retiree healthcare costs. The city still owes its pension funds about $39.7 million in what's referred to as receivables. Those are payments that should have been made into the pension funds that were not over the years. And so those are the missed payments as well as interest on the missed payments. In terms of the overall pension funds, of that $39.7 million, about $35 million of that is due to the police pension fund. About $2 million of that is due to the fire pension fund, and about $2.7 million of that, of those receivables, are due to the officers and employees pension fund. These pension plans, as we'll see in a moment, are among the worst funded in Pennsylvania, and under the law are considered, quote, severely distressed. And that is a legal term which represents the worst level of funding under the law. And we'll see as well, the city spends much more on retiree healthcare costs than it does on healthcare costs for active employees. So if we look at the pension costs, so beginning in 2021 and continuing, one of the things that we think it's important for retirees and for others to note is that since essentially becoming receiver and in his first full year of receivership, the receiver has ensured that the city has contributed an amount equal to the actuary's annual required contribution calculation to each of the pension funds. So basically, what that's meant to say is the city, since the receiver has been appointed, has made the annual contribution, the annual calculated contribution to the pension funds. For the police plan, when the receiver took over in June of 2020, it only had about almost $1.3 million of assets in order to pay benefits. In July of 2024, it has approximately $13.4 million. So that's been a significant increase, but this police pension plan still remains severely distressed. And that growth in the assets grew not only because of city contributions, but also due to the recalculation of certain pension benefits in October of 2021. And again, as of January 1st of 2023, approximately $39.7 million was owed to the three pension plans in the form of receivables. And clearly, the city of Chester does not have $40 million lying around to be able to deposit in those pension plans. I'll note on slide 11, in terms of the funding levels, if we take out the receivables, as of 1/1/23, all of these plans aggregated had a funding level of around 23.6%. Severely distressed in Pennsylvania is anything under 50%. And you'll note for each one of the plans, the police plan, if you remove the receivables, was only 7.3% funded. That is terrible. That is horrible for for any pension. The fire plan, 51.6% funded, and the officers and employees pension plan, 34.2% funded. So we're looking at pension funded status that is unheard of in other parts of Pennsylvania. If we look on slide 12, comparing municipalities with the highest total unfunded pension liabilities, if we exclude Philadelphia and Pittsburgh just because of how big they are, Chester has the second highest total unfunded pension liability and the highest pension liability per capita, which means per person. I'll just note over here, this chart for Chester City, the $82.8 million, that includes the $39.7 million in receivables. If we took that out, the total pension unfunded liability would be around $122.5 million. So again, this even if we assume the receivables are in the plan, Chester has severe unfunded pension liabilities. If we look at this on a per capita basis, right, of that same group, per capita means what's the unfunded liability divided by the population. You'll see Chester over here has the highest unfunded liability per capita. And it's not close. It is 51.6% greater than the next highest municipality, which is the city of Erie. Now, again, that includes receivables. If we exclude the receivables, which we really should because they're not in the plan and Chester really doesn't have a way of finding $40 million, this number would actually be $3,556. So it would be actually more than double the next highest, about 100, almost 118% greater. So again, that's the severity of the pension plans. And unfortunately, as bad as the pension funding level is, the retiree healthcare situation, that funding situation, is even worse. Retiree healthcare is also known as OPEB, other post-employment benefits. And again, I'll go through a couple slides over here before we get into the plan of adjustment. But if the pension situation wasn't bad enough, as I've indicated, the retiree healthcare funded situation is even worse. Part of that has to do with the fact that the healthcare plans that are offered to retirees are extremely rich and are extremely expensive. And the city has been able to move many retirees into a Medicare supplemental plan, which keeps the same benefit levels but has Medicare pay first. There's still a significant number of retirees who are not moved over because they're not Medicare Part B eligible. They did not pay into Social Security during the time that they were employed. And on slide 15, you'll see this. Like, these are the city retiree healthcare plans. And if you compare these to what's offered in the marketplace, I mean, they're really not offered in the marketplace anymore. No deductible, very low out-of-pocket max, co-pays to see your doctor of $5, co-pays to see a specialist of $5, prescription drugs $1 for generic, $3 for everything else. And that even includes specialty drugs. So drugs that could cost thousands of dollars a dose, the retiree only needs to pay $3. And again, we still have a significant number of retirees in these plans. And so if we, again, kind of go back and look at the same kind of comparison of the municipalities with the highest total pension liability. So of that same group we saw earlier, Chester had the second highest total OPEB liability and the highest OPEB liability per capita, right? If we look at it again on slide 17, the per capita, again, it's almost double. In fact, it pretty much is double the next highest municipality, which is Upper Darby Township, actually another Delaware County municipality. So we've got very, very severe retiree healthcare liabilities, very, very severe pension liabilities. And another just sort of data point here, if we look between the active and the retiree healthcare costs, the city pays more in retiree healthcare, a significant amount more than active health. And again, I'll just show slide 19, which are the costs over here for medical, for prescription, for medical and prescription. This is 2023 costs. This is what the city paid. It does not include fixed costs or stop loss insurance. But if we compare the medical and prescription for active employees, it's around $3.4 million. So it's this right here, about $3.368 million. That same amount for retirees was $4.68 million. So for retirees, it's approximately $1.3 million more just in the medical and prescription. But here's the thing, that does not include the Medicare supplemental plan. Remember, I talked about a lot of employees were moved on that so that Medicare pays first. That's another about $1.2 million. So if we really look at the comparison here, just in terms of the cost coverage, without looking at fixed costs, without looking at stop loss insurance, for retirees, the city paid around $5.9 million in 2023 for retiree healthcare, compared to around $3.4 million for active healthcare. So that is unusual to have retiree to be paying more in retiree healthcare than you have for active healthcare. That's unusual for municipalities, especially for something as high as where we are in this. So let me move on now to the plan of adjustment. Let me talk, you have a sense right now of why monetization has to occur. Let's talk about what is actually in the plan of adjustment. So the key objective of the plan that was filed yesterday was to propose a process to generate annual revenue in order to pay the city's obligations, including city services, by monetizing Chester's water, sewer, and stormwater assets. Again, and let me emphasize this, while keeping them in public hands. That is explicitly in the filing, and we are making it explicitly clear here. So under the plan, the city of Chester would seek a request for proposal, so an RFP from third parties. And by the way, those could be private or public to acquire, manage, or operate the assets of the Chester Water Authority, the Chester Stormwater Authority, and the city's reversionary interest in sewer assets in Decorah. Again, with the requirement that all assets remain publicly owned. That RFP process would be directed by the receiver, pursuant to the authority provided to him under Act 47 and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court approved recovery plan. And again, let me just also make clear the receiver does not need the bankruptcy judge's approval to move forward with the RFP process. The city can do that on its own. So let me again talk about some of the considerations in the as part of this RFP process. So again, let me again say it again for the fourth time on in this meeting, so that everybody's clear. There will be a requirement that assets remain publicly owned. And secondly, special consideration will be given to public authorities or other public entities that may be interested in a merger or other combination. So we would hope to see other public entities participate in that process. Private entities may, but we would also welcome other public authorities to do so, and who may be interested in a merger or some other combination. And I do want to call attention to a recent article that was on WHYY, a July 10th article, that discussed the concept of regionalization as an alternative to privatization. And under regionalization, an entity or authority is created by municipalities or other public entities who join together to provide services, with the entity or authority remaining publicly owned. It's an interesting article. It's one that we read. Regionalization is certainly something that could be contemplated under the RFP process that the receiver has set out in the plan of adjustment. And again, we have the link to that article. But we think that's an interesting concept, and certainly something that the receiver is open to through this plan of adjustment RFP process. So additionally, applicants or respondents to the RFP will be encouraged to provide proposals that minimize the impact on future rates and ratepayers, particularly those within the city of Chester, that retain public sector jobs, that also provide a regional approach to stormwater management with the ability to potentially manage the stormwater requirements of other communities who voluntarily agree to participate. And so let me just take a moment to talk about this a little bit more. One of the things that could come out of this that frankly we're pretty excited about is potentially an entity that could help with stormwater management across the region. Many municipalities, Chester included, are dealing with stormwater requirements. They are dealing with federal and state requirements in this area, and stormwater management is very costly. And right now, a lot of these municipalities, townships, boroughs are on their own in order to develop kind of their own responses to that. And if you have a regional entity that is able to provide these services, it provides an opportunity for other municipalities to join in, again, voluntarily to join in. But these types of entities have economies of scale, they have expertise in the area, and they have the ability, if they work together, to provide regional solutions as opposed to individual solutions for each township or borough. So again, this may come out of an RFP process, which we think would be sort of a win-win for municipalities as well as for the region. In terms of other items that applicants will be encouraged to propose, a proposed governance structure that is fair to ratepayers, that would be served by the entity. And again, we want to be clear that the RFP process will begin in the near future, and the transaction will be approved as part of the bankruptcy court confirmation process. So the result of the RFP process. So I want to take just one quick moment here to talk to city vendors. because we know when when we initially filed bankruptcy, there were a lot of questions about this, about their payments. I also want there may be also some questions regarding the plan of adjustment. We want to make very clear here. These are for city vendors. These are for contractors that are working with the city. In order to ensure that the city is able to pay its debts, provide vital and necessary services to residents, and to avoid disruptions to residents caused by the bankruptcy case, the city intends to pay trade vendors and service providers in the ordinary course, so long as those trade vendors continue to commit to continue to provide services and goods to the city on the same terms as existed before the plan filing. As vendors know, since the bankruptcy filing, we have paid vendors in the ordinary course. And if any vendor has any questions, they may contact the receiver's office at info@chesterreceivership.com, and we'll be happy to address any questions that they may have. So in terms of what happens next, first off, the receiver will begin to prepare the RFP and work to get that process started and moving. We will continue with mediation with all parties in the hopes of reaching an agreement. The receiver believes that the best outcome is a consensual resolution, but he had to take this step in order to keep the process moving forward in the event that a timely consensual resolution can't be reached. And again, to the trade vendors, the city will continue to pay undisputed claims of vendors and service providers in the ordinary course, so long as those parties continue to provide services and goods to the city on the same terms as existed before the plan filing. So with that, that is the presentation that I had. Happy to either answer questions from the committee or turn it over for any comments that the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor, for summarizing yesterday's actions and providing additional context into why these measures were taken. Opening it up to the committee for any questions of Mr. Kapoor or myself.
Yes, I have a quick question.
Please, I think I heard Councilman Davis first.
In regards to the payment of third parties that have already been assisting or partnering with the city of Chester, I know that we had a gentleman come into city council at our last meeting in regards to over outstanding bill over $60,000, I believe, that the city of Chester owed for electrical services via third party. If parties like that don't agree to continue services or to continue to partner with the city, what will be the course of action taken for, I guess, payment going forward in that regard? Because to my understanding, it will be any party that would agree to continue to serve the city of Chester, right?
Right. So 2 points on that, Councilman. What I want to also make clear, and I did on the last bullet, is the city will continue to pay undisputed claims. I believe there is some questions regarding payments there, so I don't think those would be continued. I don't think the item that you're talking about there would be considered an undisputed. So that's something that I know the city is working on. But with respect to vendors, just sort of day-to-day vendors who are providing services, where there's no dispute as to what the service is, what the payment is, those are going to continue to be paid in the ordinary course of business, just as the city has been doing since the city filed for bankruptcy back in 2022.
And the overarching point there is that business needs to continue as usual. So this is not by any means an attempt to circumvent any outstanding liabilities. Councilman Davis, in the particular issue that you're referring to, that dispute has nothing to do with the city's ability to pay. It's specific to the services that was provided. So or questions about the service provided. So those disputes will happen in the normal course of business, and they need to be resolved in a timely manner. But that's totally unrelated to bankruptcy.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Mr. Kapoor, I have a question regarding something you brought up a couple times, and it has to do with the pension liability, you had stated that we're the highest underfunded pension liability per capita. It's the per capita piece that I'm a little puzzled about. What is it about per capita that becomes a factor that we should be concerned about?
Well, so Mayor, good question. And, just for folks who are following along, what we mean by per capita is it's basically that means kind of per person, right? So you take the total unfunded liability and you divide it by the population of Chester. And that tells you kind of effectively how much of a liability is on a kind of, we refer to as a per person basis. The point of that is, sometimes you see these very, very large unfunded liabilities, right? But that may be because the city has a large population, right? And just by virtue of the fact that you've got a large population, you've got a larger unfunded liability. The point we're trying to make over here is for a city as small as Chester, of around 35,000 people, for it to have a liability as big as it does, an unfunded pension liability and an unfunded retiree healthcare liability, it just puts into perspective like how big that is given the size of Chester. So it's kind of a measurement that helps you compare kind of cities. It essentially accounts for population. So it takes a population sort of out of the equation and just really kind of shows again for a city of like 34,000, 35,000, you on a kind of on a basically on an individual basis, you are the city of Chester just has liabilities that are much, much greater than most other communities in Pennsylvania.
I mean, is it a reflection of the impact on the population of the city, or just the measurement comparing populations of cities?
I think, Mayor, probably the best way of saying it, what it tells me is just the magnitude of the problem. It tells me that, okay, you can say that the city of Chester has, $164 million in OPEB liability, $164 million in OPEB liability. But what it tells me is if I compare that to other cities over there, that may have $200 million or 150, or maybe the same, that the problem is just so much bigger in Chester because the population is so much smaller. And so if you look at it a different way too, what you're saying is in order to pay for this, right? If we think of it from the perspective of the residents, the burden for an individual Chester resident, right, to pay for that is much greater than the burden for an Allentown resident.
Okay, that's kind of where I was getting at. Okay, I got it. The last statement or question I have, can you bring back your final slide before the one
Yes,
that's
Mayor.
at the end?
Just give me 1 second. Let me pull this up. The what happens next, or
I don't know. I don't remember. Let me see the final.
oops. Mayor, this one?
So one after that?
There's
No.
not.
Okay, so it must be that one. I guess I forgot specifically what the question was, but it refers to the fact that you said the city can initiate the RFP process right away or without the judge's permission or approval.
Correct.
I'm starting to remember my question. The purpose of the filing then for the plan of adjustment, somewhere you kind of stated the filing helps keep this moving forward. I guess what I'm trying to say, could we have done an RFP without a plan of adjustment? I guess that's the point I want to make. Like what is this plan of adjustment in federal court providing us? Are we waiting for the judge to say your plan of adjustment is okay, proceed? Because it doesn't quite sound like that.
No, I think what we're doing with providing the with filing the plan of adjustment is to make all the parties aware of what the receiver's desired direction is, and we believe that that's important to again to kind of keep the process moving forward. So, um, again, does the receiver need to did the receiver need the bankruptcy judge's approval to commence the RFP process? No. But as part of any conclusion of the RFP process and monetization of assets as part of a larger plan of adjustment, that will need to be approved by the bankruptcy court. So in terms of kind of like the end result of all this, um, uh, through the kind of the global resolution of all the creditor issues, that will need to be approved by the federal judge.
Okay, that's clear. Thanks.
Mr. Kapoor, could you add on a little bit there about the excuse me, the creditor classes that were established and just the treatment of the unsecured claims, just some more context, like the plan of adjustment established a framework there, while monetization is the primary focus for this step. Just want to mention some of the general structure of the plan of adjustment.
So in terms of kind of what a plan of adjustment kind of includes is, I mean, the way kind of the bankruptcy lawyers would talk about this is you have different types of classes that are within bankruptcy, different types of creditor classes. You have secured claims, you have unsecured claims, and different kind of creditors are in different classes. And under bankruptcy, these various classes, there's sort of various rights that each of these classes has to have. So, what this does is this sets forth some initial classes there and class treatment of those groups, and that is also included in the plan of adjustment.
I have a few questions.
Okay.
About the process for the RFP. Do you plan to put it out for anyone to respond to, or will this be sort of a targeted solicitation?
No, I mean, I think part of the RFP process is trying to bring in, again, as many parties as we possibly can. We're going to continue to work on what what the requirements are, to emphasize again that whatever bidders do, that the requirement that the assets remain publicly owned. But we're open to ideas. We're open to a variety of third parties, again, whether they be private entities or public entities. We're open to it. So we're not looking for one particular targeted group.
And then my other question was, do you feel confident that you would be able to defend a decision to keep shareholder-owned utilities from submitting a large bid?
Well, again, so from our end, as we've said, like whether it's a private entity or a public entity, in terms of the management, acquiring, or operations, we're not putting any restriction there in terms of the groups that could submit. But again, at the end of the day, the assets have to remain in public hands, right? So could a private entity bid on this and say, look, like we'll operate these, but they'll remain in public hands under this? Sure. But the requirement that they remain publicly owned is something that, again, we want to make clear. And again, it would be great if other public entities decided to do this, right? To join in as well. But again, I'll continue to reiterate the requirement that the assets must remain in public hands.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the questions. Are there any other questions of the committee? From the committee? Hearing none. Again, thank you, Mr. Kapoor, for today's presentation. I think this will conclude our second meeting here in August. We will reconvene the second Tuesday in September at 1 p.m. Meeting invitations and announcements to go out the week prior. If nothing else for today, thank you everyone for joining. Look forward to meeting with you soon. Have a good day.